Oh, where do I even begin? It was the kind of day that starts like any other, but ends up changing your life forever. I was standing in the pouring rain, drenched to the bone, holding an umbrella that had given up its last breath in the storm. I had just received the news that my grandmother, the woman who raised me, had passed away. I was numb, lost, and completely alone in the world, or so I thought. As I stood there, feeling the cold rain mix with the hot tears streaming down my face, I heard a car pull up beside me. The window rolled down, and there he was, Ethan, my childhood best friend, the boy who knew all my secrets except one. He hadn't changed a bit, still had that mop of curly hair and those warm, inviting eyes. "Get in, Alex," he said, his voice as familiar as the back of my hand. I hesitated for a moment, then climbed into the car, soaked and shivering. Ethan turned up the heat and handed me a towel from his gym bag. "I heard about your grandma," he said softly. "I'm so sorry, Alex." I nodded, unable to speak, the lump in my throat growing bigger by the second. We drove in silence for a while, the only sound the rhythmic thumping of the windshield wipers. Then, out of the blue, Ethan asked, "Remember when we were kids and we used to talk about running away together?" I looked at him, surprised. "Yeah, we had it all planned out. We were going to build a treehouse in the woods and live off the land," I said, a small smile playing on my lips despite the heaviness in my heart. Ethan laughed, a sound that warmed me more than the heater ever could. "We were so naive," he said, shaking his head, "but it was a nice dream." As we pulled up to my grandma's old house, the reality of her being gone hit me like a punch to the gut. I started to cry again, big, ugly sobs that racked my body. Ethan reached over and pulled me into a hug, his strong arms holding me together as I fell apart. "It's okay, Alex," he murmured. "I've got you. You're not alone." And that's when it happened, the moment that changed everything. Ethan pulled back slightly, his hands still on my shoulders, and looked into my eyes. There was something in his gaze, something I had never seen before. And then, slowly, he leaned in and kissed me. It was soft, gentle, and over almost as soon as it began. But in that moment, everything clicked into place. The world around me faded away, and all I could feel was Ethan's lips on mine, his breath mingling with my own. It was like coming home after a long, exhausting journey. But as quickly as the moment came, it vanished. Ethan pulled away, a look of shock and confusion on his face. "Alex, I'm sorry," he stammered. "I don't know what came over me." I was speechless, my mind racing a mile a minute. Ethan, my best friend, the boy I had grown up with, had just kissed me, and I realized in that moment that I had been in love with him for years. But how could that be? I had always known I was different, but I had never allowed myself to explore what that meant. I had dated girls, tried to fit into the mold society had created for me, but it had never felt right. And now, here I was sitting in Ethan's car, my grandmother's house looming in the background, feeling like my world had just been turned upside down. Ethan looked at me, his eyes searching mine for some kind of reaction. "Alex, say something," he pleaded, but I couldn't. I was frozen, my mind and heart at war with each other. I wanted to tell him that it was okay, that I had felt something too, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I did the only thing I could think of. I got out of the car and ran into the house, leaving Ethan alone in the driveway. As I stood in my grandmother's living room, surrounded by her things, her scent still lingering in the air, I realized that my life would never be the same. I had lost the woman who raised me, the woman who had been my rock for as long as I could remember. And in the same day, I had found something else, something I never knew I needed. I had found a piece of myself, a piece that had been missing for so long. And it was all because of Ethan, because of that kiss. But little did I know, that was just the beginning of my journey. The road ahead was filled with twists and turns, heartache and joy, and a love story that would change not only my life, but Ethan's as well. And it all started with that kiss, that moment when I realized that I was finally, truly home. I spent the night in my grandmother's house, surrounded by memories and the ghost of her laughter. I couldn't face Ethan, not after that kiss, not after the storm of emotions it had unleashed within me. I paced the floors, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts and feelings I couldn't begin to untangle. I was raw, exposed, and utterly terrified. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Ethan standing there, 2 cups of coffee in hand, looking as nervous as I felt. "Morning," he said, extending one of the cups to me. I took it, my fingers brushing against his, sending a jolt of electricity through me. "About yesterday, Alex," he started, but I cut him off. "Ethan, I can't talk about that right now," I said, turning away from him and walking into the kitchen. He followed me, setting his coffee down on the table. "Alex, please," he pleaded. "I need to understand what happened. I need to know if I ruined everything." I turned to face him, my heart aching at the sight of the pain in his eyes. "You didn't ruin anything, Ethan," I said softly. "You just surprised me. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect to feel what I felt." Ethan looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "And what did you feel, Alex?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, the words stuck in my throat. I wanted to tell him the truth, to confess that I had been in love with him for years, but the fear of rejection held me back. Instead, I said, "I felt confused, Ethan. I don't know what this means, what I mean to you, what you mean to me." Ethan nodded, looking down at his hands. "I understand," he said. "But Alex, I need you to know something. That kiss, it wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment thing. It wasn't just because you were hurting and I wanted to comfort you. It was because I've been feeling something for you for a long time, something I never allowed myself to acknowledge until yesterday." My heart stopped. Ethan had feelings for me. For how long? Why hadn't he said anything? The questions swirled in my mind, but I couldn't bring myself to voice them. Instead, I just stood there, staring at him, my mouth open in shock. Ethan looked up at me, a small smile playing on his lips. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Alex," he said, chuckling softly. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog that had settled over my brain. I don't know what to say, Ethan," I stammered. "I don't know what this means for us, for our friendship." Ethan took a step closer to me, his eyes never leaving mine. "It means that we need to figure this out, Alex," he said. "It means that we need to be honest with each other and with ourselves. It means that we need to give this a chance to see where it goes." I took a deep breath, my mind racing. This was all happening so fast, too fast. I needed time to process, to think, to understand what this all meant. But looking into Ethan's eyes, seeing the sincerity and the hope shining in them, I knew I couldn't run away from this. I couldn't run away from him. "Okay," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Okay, let's figure this out, together." Ethan's face lit up, his smile so bright it took my breath away. "Together," he echoed, reaching out and taking my hand in his. It felt right, his hand in mine, like 2 pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. But little did we know, our journey was just beginning. The road ahead was filled with challenges and obstacles, with heartache and joy, and with a love story that would change not only our lives, but the lives of those around us. And it all started with that decision, that moment when we chose to face our feelings, to face each other, and to face the world together. As we sat there, our hands entwined, our future uncertain but our hearts open and ready, I realized that this was what it felt like to be truly alive. This was what it felt like to be truly seen, truly understood, truly loved. And I knew in that moment that no matter what happened, no matter where this journey took us, I would always cherish this feeling, this moment, this love. But our love story was far from conventional, far from easy. We were two boys from a small town, raised with certain expectations, certain beliefs. And our love, our beautiful, complicated love, was about to challenge all of that. It was about to challenge us, our families, our friends, and our entire community. And we had no idea if our love would survive the storm. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions and discoveries. Ethan and I spent every waking moment together, exploring this new dynamic between us. We talked for hours, sharing secrets and dreams we had never dared to voice before. We laughed, we cried, and we kissed, a lot. Each kiss was a revelation, a piece of the puzzle falling into place. I was falling in love with Ethan, and he was falling in love with me. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. But as our bond deepened, the reality of our situation began to sink in. We lived in a small town, a place where everyone knew everyone else's business. Coming out as a couple would not be easy. We knew there would be whispers, stares, and possibly even outright hostility. The thought of facing that together was daunting, but the thought of facing it alone was unbearable. One evening, as we sat on the porch of my grandmother's house, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, Ethan brought up the topic we had both been avoiding. "Alex, we need to talk about what happens next," he said, his voice serious. I looked at him, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew what he was getting at, but I wasn't ready to face it. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to buy myself some time. Ethan took my hand in his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "I mean, we can't keep this a secret forever," he said. "Eventually, people are going to find out, and we need to be prepared for that." I sighed, looking out at the setting sun. He was right, of course. We couldn't hide forever. But the thought of coming out, of facing the judgment and potential rejection of our community, was overwhelming. "I know," I said softly, "but I'm scared, Ethan. I'm scared of what people will say, of how they'll react." Ethan squeezed my hand, his eyes filled with determination. "I know you're scared, Alex, I am too. But we can't let fear control our lives. We can't let it keep us from being who we are, from loving who we love." His words struck a chord deep within me. He was right. We couldn't live in fear, couldn't live in the shadows. We deserved to be happy, to be true to ourselves and to each other. But the path ahead was uncertain, and the thought of navigating it alone was terrifying. "Okay," I said, taking a deep breath. "Okay, let's do this, together." Ethan smiled, his eyes shining with love and pride. "Together," he echoed. But our resolve was about to be tested in ways we never imagined. The very next day, as we walked hand in hand through the park, we ran into someone from our past, someone who would change everything. Emma, Ethan's ex-girlfriend, was sitting on a bench, her eyes widening in shock as she saw us. She had always been kind to me, but I knew she still had feelings for Ethan. Seeing us together, seeing the love that was so evident between us, was bound to be a shock. "Ethan, Alex," she stammered, her eyes darting between us. Ethan squeezed my hand, a silent show of support. "Hi, Emma," he said, his voice steady. "It's good to see you." Emma looked at us, her expression a mix of confusion and hurt. "What is this?" she asked, gesturing to our entwined hands. Ethan took a deep breath, his grip on my hand tightening. "This is us, Emma," he said. "This is who we are." Emma's eyes filled with tears, and I felt a pang of guilt. I knew this was hard for her, knew that seeing Ethan with someone else, especially someone like me, was painful. But we couldn't hide who we were, couldn't deny our love for each other. "I don't understand," Emma said, her voice shaking. You're together, like together." Ethan nodded, his eyes never leaving Emma's. "Yes, we're together, and we're happy, Emma, really happy." Emma looked at us, her tears spilling over. But you're both guys," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan smiled softly, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. "Yes, we are," he said, "and we're in love." Emma looked at us for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to our surprise, she smiled. "I'm happy for you," she said, her voice sincere. "I mean it, you both deserve to be happy." Ethan and I looked at each other, shock and relief washing over us. We had expected judgment, maybe even anger, but not acceptance. Not so readily. "Thank you, Emma," Ethan said, his voice filled with gratitude. Emma nodded, her smile growing wider. "Just promise me one thing," she said. "Promise me you'll be happy, that you'll take care of each other." "We promise," Ethan and I said in unison, our voices filled with conviction. And in that moment, we knew. We knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, no matter what obstacles we faced, we would face them together. We would be each other's strength, each other's support, each other's home. But little did we know, our journey was far from over. The road ahead was filled with more twists and turns, more heartache and joy, and more love than we ever could have imagined. And it all started with that moment, that promise, that vow to be true to ourselves and to each other, no matter what. As we walked away from Emma, our hands still entwined, our hearts filled with love and hope, I realized that this was just the beginning. This was the start of our journey, our love story, our life together. And I couldn't wait to see where it would take us. The days turned into weeks, and Ethan and I settled into a rhythm that felt both exhilarating and comforting. We were out to our closest friends and family, and while there were some awkward moments and difficult conversations, we were mostly met with love and support. Our little bubble of happiness felt unbreakable, and we were ready to take on the world together. But as we soon found out, the world wasn't quite ready for us. One afternoon, we decided to go to the local diner for lunch. It was a place we'd been to 100 times before, but this time was different. This time, we walked in holding hands, our love for each other plain for all to see. The diner fell silent as we entered, every eye turning to stare at us. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but Ethan squeezed my hand, giving me the courage to keep walking. We sat down at a booth by the window, the silence in the diner deafening. The waitress, a woman who had served us countless times before, approached our table cautiously, her eyes darting between our entwined hands. "What can I get you boys?" she asked, her voice stiff and formal. We placed our order, trying to act as normal as possible, but the tension in the air was palpable. As we waited for our food, we could hear the whispers starting up around us. People were leaning in close to each other, casting furtive glances our way, their expressions ranging from curious to downright hostile. I felt my palms start to sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. This was what we had feared, what we had prepared for, but now that it was happening, it was even more unsettling than I had imagined. Ethan leaned in close to me, his voice low and steady. "It's okay, Alex," he said. "We knew this was going to happen. We can get through this together." I nodded, taking a deep breath and trying to calm my racing heart. He was right. We had known this was coming, had known that not everyone would accept us with open arms, but knowing it and experiencing it were two very different things. Our food arrived, and we ate in silence, the whispers and stares continuing around us. I could feel the weight of every judgmental glance, every disapproving frown. It was like a physical pressure pushing down on me, making it hard to breathe. But through it all, Ethan was there, his hand in mine, his love giving me the strength to keep going. As we finished our meal and stood to leave, the diner fell silent once again. We walked hand in hand to the counter, where the waitress handed us our check, her eyes downcast. Ethan paid, and as we turned to leave, a voice rang out from the back of the diner. "You should be ashamed of yourselves." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I turned to see an older man standing by his table, his eyes filled with disgust as he looked at us. Ethan's grip on my hand tightened, and I could feel the tension radiating from him. But when he spoke, his voice was calm and steady. "We have nothing to be ashamed of, sir," he said. "We're just two people in love trying to live our lives, just like everyone else in this diner." The man scoffed, his expression growing even more hostile. "Love," he sneered. "That's not love, that's an abomination." The words hung in the air, heavy and ugly. I felt my cheeks flush with anger and humiliation, but Ethan stood tall, his eyes never leaving the man's face. "Love is love, sir," he said, "and we won't let anyone make us feel ashamed for it." With that, he turned and led me out of the diner, our hands still entwined, our heads held high. As we stepped out into the sunlight, I felt a rush of pride and love for Ethan. He had stood up for us, for our love, in the face of hatred and bigotry, and he had done it with grace and dignity. But the encounter had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. As we walked home, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. I had known that coming out would be difficult, had known that we would face judgment and hostility, but I hadn't been prepared for the sheer ugliness of it, the raw hatred that we had seen in that man's eyes. Ethan seemed to sense my turmoil, and as we walked, he pulled me close, his arm wrapping around my shoulders. "It's okay, Alex," he said softly. "We knew this was going to be hard, but we can't let people like that get to us. We can't let them make us feel ashamed for who we are, for who we love." I nodded, leaning into his embrace. He was right, of course. We couldn't let the hatred of others define us, couldn't let it tear us down. We had to stand tall, to stand proud, to stand together. But even as I thought this, I knew that the road ahead would be difficult. We would face more challenges, more hatred, more judgment. But we would face it all together, our love for each other giving us the strength to keep going, no matter what. As we walked up the steps to my grandmother's house, our arms wrapped around each other, I realized that this was what it meant to be truly brave. It meant facing the world head-on, standing up for who we were, for who we loved, no matter what obstacles were thrown in our path. And it meant doing it all together, side by side, hand in hand, heart to heart. But little did we know, our bravery was about to be tested in ways we never could have imagined. The road ahead was filled with even more challenges, even more heartache, and even more love than we ever could have dreamed. And it all started with that moment, that decision, that vow to stand tall and proud, no matter what. As the weeks turned into months, Ethan and I found our stride. We became more confident in our relationship, more open about our love, and more determined to make a difference in our community. We joined a local LGBTQ plus support group, made new friends, and even started volunteering at a community center for queer youth. Our world was expanding, and with it, our love for each other was growing stronger every day. One evening, as we sat in the community center after a long day of volunteering, Ethan turned to me, his eyes shining with excitement. "Alex, I've been thinking," he said. "We should do something big, something that will really make a difference." I looked at him, intrigued. "What do you have in mind?" I asked. Ethan grinned, his enthusiasm infectious. "I think we should organize a pride event," he said, "right here in our town. Something that will bring everyone together, that will show the world that we are proud of who we are and that we won't be silenced." I stared at him, my heart swelling with pride and love. It was a bold idea, a brave idea, and it was perfectly Ethan. "I think that's an amazing idea," I said, my voice filled with conviction. "Let's do it." And so, we threw ourselves into planning the event. We reached out to local businesses, recruited volunteers, and spread the word far and wide. The response was overwhelming. People from all walks of life came forward to offer their support, their time, their resources. It was incredible to see our community coming together in such a powerful way. But as the event drew closer, we began to face pushback. There were angry letters to the editor in the local newspaper, hostile comments on social media, and even a petition to cancel the event. It was disheartening, but we refused to let it deter us. We knew that this event was important, that it was necessary, and we were determined to see it through. The day of the event arrived, and we woke up to a beautiful, sunny morning. The park was a riot of color, with rainbow flags flying high and proud. There were booths set up by local businesses, a stage for performances, and even a small parade planned. As we stood at the entrance, greeting people as they arrived, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that was almost overwhelming. But as the day wore on, we began to notice a group of protesters gathering at the edge of the park. They held signs with hateful slogans, their faces twisted in anger and disgust. I felt a pang of fear, but Ethan took my hand, his grip steady and reassuring. "We knew this was going to happen," he said. "We can't let them ruin this day for us, for everyone." He was right, of course. We had known that there would be pushback, that there would be hatred and bigotry, but we had also known that this event was bigger than that it was about love and acceptance and pride, and we refused to let anyone take that away from us. As the protesters grew louder and more aggressive, a group of police officers arrived to keep the peace. They formed a barrier between the protesters and the event, their presence a silent show of support. And as the day wore on, something incredible happened. The crowd at the event grew larger and larger, dwarfing the small group of protesters until they were barely noticeable. People from all walks of life came together, their voices raised in song and laughter, their hearts open and accepting. And in that moment, I realized that this was what it was all about. This was why we had fought so hard, why we had refused to back down. It was about love, about acceptance, about community. It was about showing the world that we were proud of who we were and that we wouldn't be silenced, no matter what. As the sun began to set, Ethan pulled me onto the stage. He took the microphone, his voice steady and strong as he addressed the crowd. "Thank you all for being here today," he said. "Thank you for standing with us, for supporting us, for showing the world that love is love, no matter what." The crowd cheered, their voices rising up into the sky like a chorus of hope and acceptance. Ethan turned to me, his eyes shining with love and pride. "And thank you, Alex," he said. "Thank you for being by my side, for loving me, for being my home." Tears filled my eyes as I looked out at the crowd, at the sea of faces smiling up at us. This was our community, our family, our home. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, no matter what obstacles we faced, we would face them together. We would stand tall and proud, our love for each other giving us the strength to keep going, no matter what. And as Ethan leaned in and kissed me, right there on that stage, in front of the whole world, I realized that this was it. This was the moment that defined us, the moment that changed everything. This was the moment when I truly, finally, completely realized that I was home. So if you're watching this video, if you're listening to our story, know this: you are not alone. You are loved, you are accepted, and you are enough just as you are. And if you ever doubt that, if you ever need a reminder, just look at us, look at our love, look at our journey, and know that you too can find your home, your happiness, your pride. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, to watch our videos, and to comment down below with your favorite part of the video. Let's build a community together, a family, a home. Because together we are unstoppable. Together we are proud. Together we are home.